My name is Jonah Malek, and for as long as I can remember, my life has revolved around faith, tradition, and the rituals that formed the bedrock of my existence. Every sunrise was marked by prayer, every sunset by reflection, and the hours in between were spent navigating the intricate responsibilities of a religious leader. I was respected, revered even within my community. People sought my guidance as if I were a beacon of wisdom, illuminating the path for those who struggled to find their way. Yet, beneath the surface of this seemingly steadfast devotion lay an unease I could never quite shake. Late at night, when the world grew silent and my own thoughts echoed in the stillness, questions emerged like shadows I tried to avoid. Was I truly connected to the divine? Did my endless devotion lead me closer to the eternal truth I sought? Or had I become trapped in a cycle, clinging to rituals that masked a deeper emptiness? Such questions were dangerous. They threatened the very foundation of the life I had built, and so I buried them, refusing to entertain the whispers of doubt that seemed to grow louder with each passing year. From the outside, my life was a model of dedication and purpose. I had a clear role, a respected position, and a certainty that anchored me amid the chaos of the world. Yet, inside, I often felt like a man stranded in a desert, searching for water that seemed eternally out of reach. On one particular evening, as the orange hues of twilight faded into the deep blue of night, I stood in the courtyard of the mosque, observing the faithful as they gathered. Their faces bore expressions of trust and gratitude, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. These people believed in me, looked to me for answers, and trusted that I had access to truths they couldn't yet grasp. It was an honor and a burden, one I carried with pride but also with an unspoken heaviness. The call to prayer echoed across the courtyard, drawing everyone into the main hall. I followed, my steps measured, my posture confident, my outward appearance betraying nothing of the turmoil inside. As the prayers began, the rhythmic recitations calmed the congregation, creating a symphony of faith that connected them in unity. But for me, it was different. Beneath the melodic sounds and shared devotion, I felt a growing disconnection, a hollow void that seemed to deepen with each passing moment. That night, as I led the final prayer, something inside me shifted. I couldn't name the sensation. It was subtle yet profound, a fleeting awareness that I wasn't as whole as I had once believed. It wasn't doubt in my faith or devotion, but rather a realization that perhaps I was missing something essential, something fundamental that no amount of prayer or ritual could replace. I dismissed the thought quickly, though, focusing on my role and the people who relied on me. After all, doubt was not a luxury I could afford, not when so many depended on my unwavering certainty. As the final words of the prayer left my lips and the congregation began to disperse, I felt a sudden wave of fatigue wash over me. It was more than physical exhaustion. It was a spiritual weariness that had been creeping up on me for years. I tried to push it aside, chalking it up to the demands of leadership and the weight of responsibility. But deep down, I knew it was something more. Later that night, as I sat alone in my quarters, the unease returned. The questions I had suppressed for so long began to rise again, demanding attention. Was my devotion genuine, or had it become a performance? Did my leadership truly serve the divine, or was it more about the respect and authority it brought me? The uncertainty gnawed at me, unsettling the carefully constructed identity I had cultivated for decades. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, searching for answers in the patterns of light and shadow that danced across the plaster. And for a brief moment, I allowed myself to acknowledge the truth I had been avoiding for so long. I wasn't as sure of myself as I pretended to be. The path I walked, the one I had devoted my life to, seemed straight and true on the surface, but deep down, it felt more like a labyrinth, a maze of unanswered questions and unexplored possibilities. Before I could delve further into these thoughts, the sound of footsteps outside my door pulled me back to the present. A knock followed, and a young man, a student of mine, entered, seeking guidance on a matter of faith. His earnestness reminded me of my own younger self, a time when certainty came easily and questions were met with resolute answers. I listened carefully, offering advice and reassurance, but as the conversation ended and he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had given him half-truths, answers that were more about preserving his trust in me than truly addressing the depths of his concerns. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, staring at the darkness, feeling the weight of the questions I couldn't escape. Was this truly the life I was meant to lead, or had I become trapped in a cycle that offered the appearance of devotion without the substance? These were questions I wasn't yet ready to face, but little did I know, the events that would soon unfold would force me to confront them in ways I could never have imagined. It was a warm evening, the kind that begged for introspection and quiet moments under the fading light. I had just finished leading the evening prayer at the mosque. The room had been filled with voices rising in unison, their tones steeped in faith and hope. As always, I felt the weight of my role pressing down on me, a mixture of pride and responsibility. The faithful turned to me for guidance, for the answers that I had spent years training myself to deliver without hesitation. I stepped outside, letting the fresh air fill my lungs. My heart felt heavy, but it wasn't the kind of heaviness that prayer or meditation could easily dispel. It was something deeper, something I refused to name. In my pocket, I carried my prayer beads, running my fingers over each one as I muttered quiet invocations. Yet, even the rhythmic counting brought no comfort. I walked the familiar path toward my quarters, letting my mind wander. As I moved under the dim light of the street lamps, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different tonight, an uneasiness that gnawed at me quietly. The breeze carried with it a faint chill, even though the warmth of the day still clung to the air. As I reached the courtyard, it happened. The pain hit me suddenly, a sharp, agonizing bolt that coursed through my chest and radiated down my left arm. It stole the breath from my lungs and my vision blurred at the edges. My knees buckled, and the world around me seemed to tilt unnaturally. I tried to cry out, to call for help, but the sound stuck in my throat. Before I knew it, I was lying on the cold stone ground. Around me, the world seemed to melt away into a cacophony of shouts and hurried footsteps. Familiar faces loomed over me, friends, students, followers, all wearing expressions of panic and worry. Yet, their voices grew distant, as if someone had turned down the volume of the world itself. The pain faded, replaced by an eerie numbness. And then, silence. I was no longer there. The courtyard, the mosque, the concerned faces, they vanished as though swept away by a tide. What replaced them was something entirely unfamiliar and utterly terrifying. I opened my eyes to find myself surrounded by impenetrable darkness, stretching endlessly in every direction. There was no ground beneath my feet, no sky above my head. It was as if I had been transported to a void, a place devoid of light, sound, and reason. I tried to move, to speak, to cry out, but my body felt disconnected, as though it didn't belong to me anymore. Panic gripped me, and the void seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It wasn't empty, it was alive, watching, waiting. Fear wrapped its cold fingers around my heart, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. This wasn't the afterlife I had envisioned. All my life, I had been certain that death would bring clarity, judgment, or perhaps a glimpse of paradise. But this was none of those things. This was emptiness, a suffocating void that seemed to echo my very being. Then came the whispers. Faint at first, like the rustling of leaves in the wind, they grew louder and more distinct. They weren't kind or comforting. They were accusing, voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They spoke of my life, my choices, my flaws. They were relentless, peeling back the layers of self-assuredness I had built over the years. "You thought you knew the truth," one voice hissed, sharp and cutting, "but you were blind." Images began to flash before me, emerging from the darkness like scenes projected onto an infinite canvas. They weren't the memories I carried in my mind, polished and curated over years of reflection. No, These were raw, unfiltered moments, the truth beneath the facade. I saw myself preaching, leading prayers, instructing others with conviction. On the surface, it all seemed righteous, but the whispers stripped away the veneer, exposing the pride hidden underneath. You took pride in your knowledge, another voice sneered. In the respect you commanded. You thought your rituals would secure your salvation. The darkness seemed to close in around me, pressing against me like a physical weight. The whispers turned into a cacophony, each one highlighting my failures, my arrogance, my moments of judgment. I saw times when I had dismissed people's struggles, believing their pain was a consequence of their lack of faith. I saw how I had built walls between myself and others, and worse, walls between myself and God. My heart felt heavy, crushed by the truth of my own shortcomings. I had spent years striving to serve God, but now I was forced to confront a question I had never dared to ask. Had I truly known Him, or had I simply followed the rules, convinced that my devotion alone was enough? The despair was overwhelming. I had always believed I was on the right path, but now, in the suffocating darkness, I wasn't so sure. The weight of my life's choices bore down on me, and for the first time, I felt utterly lost. I fell to my knees, though I couldn't see the ground beneath me. My voice trembled as I whispered into the void, barely audible over the relentless whispers. If you are truly merciful, if you are truly there, show me the truth. I don't know what to do. Please, help me. And then, silence. The whispers stopped, and the darkness seemed to hold its breath, as though the void itself had paused to listen. For a moment there was nothing. No sound, no movement, no presence. Just a deep and unsettling stillness. Then, out of nowhere, a light appeared. The light of the courtyard faded into memory as the sensation of falling consumed me. It wasn't a physical fall. There was no ground beneath me, but the descent was undeniable. My very soul seemed to be spiraling downward, deeper and deeper into a place that defied comprehension. It was suffocating, yet somehow weightless, as though existence itself had been turned inside out. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the mosque, nor was I in a hospital surrounded by concerned faces. Instead, I found myself in a void, a vast, oppressive emptiness that stretched endlessly in every direction. The darkness wasn't simply an absence of light. It was a presence, alive and pulsating with an energy I couldn't understand. It watched me, a silent observer, as if it knew the depths of my heart and the truths I had spent years avoiding. I tried to move, to speak, to make sense of what was happening, but my body was unresponsive. The fear that gripped me was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was primal, raw, and all-consuming. Every breath felt heavy, like inhaling the weight of my own doubt and insecurity. The teachings I had devoted my life to seemed distant, inadequate, and powerless against the enormity of this void. And then the whispers began. At first, they were faint, barely distinguishable from the stillness that surrounded me. They sounded like murmurs carried on a breeze that didn't exist. But as moments passed, or what I perceived as moments, they grew louder, more distinct, until they were deafening. The whispers weren't comforting, they were accusing, sharp as daggers that seemed to pierce through every layer of my identity. You thought you knew the truth, one voice hissed, cold and unforgiving. But you were blind to your own arrogance. Another followed, venomous and biting. You sought to lead others, but you were lost yourself. The accusations multiplied, each one striking at the core of who I believed myself to be. Images began to flicker before me in the darkness. Moments from my life played out in vivid detail. But these weren't the memories I carried with pride, polished and curated over the years. They were unfiltered, raw, and brutally honest. I saw my younger self, eager and passionate, teaching others with an air of certainty. I saw the respect and reverence in their eyes, and I had once thought of those moments as proof of my faithfulness. But now, in the void, the whispers peeled back the layers, exposing the hidden pride beneath my actions. You took pride in your knowledge, one voice sneered. You believed you were above doubt, above weakness, But where has that pride led you now? The darkness seemed to press closer, suffocating me with its weight. More images appeared, times when I had judged others harshly, dismissing their struggles as signs of spiritual inadequacy. I saw the moments when I had let my own ego dictate my actions, believing that my adherence to rituals and traditions made me righteous. The whispers highlighted each failure, each missed opportunity to show compassion, each time I had chosen pride over humility. My heart felt like it was being crushed under the weight of these revelations. The truths I had avoided for years were now laid bare before me, and there was no escape. I tried to plead, to cry out, to defend myself, but the void offered no opportunity for justification. It demanded honesty, raw and unfiltered. I spent my life seeking to serve God. I whispered into the darkness, my voice trembling and broken. Was it all in vain? The whispers paused, as if considering my plea. For a moment there was silence, a heavy, suffocating stillness that seemed to stretch infinitely. Then one final voice emerged from the void, steady and unwavering. You followed the rules, it said, its tone neither cruel nor kind, but you missed the truth. Tears streamed down my face as the enormity of those words sank in. I had devoted my life to prayer, fasting, teaching, and leading. I had believed I was walking the straight path, destined for paradise. But now, in the depths of the void, I was forced to confront the reality I had long ignored. My actions, my devotion, my knowledge, they weren't enough. I had sought salvation through striving, not through surrender. Despair overwhelmed me. The darkness seemed to close in, pressing against me from all sides. I fell to my knees, though I couldn't see the ground beneath me. It felt as though the very fabric of my existence was unraveling, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. If you are truly merciful, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the echoes of the void, if you are truly there, show me the truth. I don't know what to do. Please help me. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing. The darkness held its breath, and the void itself seemed to pause, as if weighing my desperate plea. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for whatever judgment might come, and then, out of the silence, a light appeared. At first it was faint, a flicker of warmth in the overwhelming cold, but it grew steadily, piercing through the darkness with an intensity that made the shadows recoil. The void itself seemed to shrink back, retreating from the presence of the light. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, radiant and alive, pulsing with an energy that filled me with both awe and fear. The light enveloped me, and for the first time since my collapse, I felt warmth, a deep, comforting warmth that reached into the very core of my being. The fear and despair that had gripped me moments before began to melt away, replaced by a profound sense of peace. It was as though the light carried with it a promise, a hope that I had long forgotten. And then, within the light, I felt a presence. It was powerful yet gentle, vast yet intimately close. It was a presence that knew me completely, my fears, my failures, my doubts, and yet it didn't reject me. Instead, it offered an embrace, a love so overwhelming that tears streamed down my face. In that moment, I understood something profound. The void was not my end. It was my beginning. In the midst of the void, the light appeared, a glimmer so faint at first that I barely noticed it against the oppressive darkness. It was like the tiniest flicker of a candle in the distance, fragile yet undeniable. As I focused on it, the light began to grow, expanding and intensifying with each passing moment. It cut through the shadows, revealing their true nature. The void around me seemed to recoil, retreating from the brilliance of this presence. The light was alive. It wasn't just illumination, it was a presence, pulsing with a power so vast that I felt dwarfed in its radiance, and yet, despite its magnitude, it felt intimate, as though it had come for me alone. It carried warmth, a profound sense of peace that began to fill the hollow space inside me, the void that even years of devotion and ritual had never been able to touch. I felt myself drawn toward the light, though I couldn't explain how. It wasn't a physical movement. I didn't have a body here. but my very essence seemed to inch closer, as though the light called to the deepest part of me. The fear that had gripped me moments before melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of awe. Then, from the heart of the light, I felt it, a presence unlike any I had ever encountered. It was vast, powerful, and all-encompassing. It was both terrifying and comforting, as though it held the entirety of the universe and yet cared for me personally. I could feel it examining me, not in judgment, but in truth. It saw everything, every flaw, every failure, every hidden corner of my soul, and yet it did not turn away. A voice emerged from the light. It was neither loud nor forceful, yet it carried a weight that seemed to resonate through every fiber of my being. "Jonah," it said, calling me by name. The sound of it was indescribable, filled with a love and understanding so profound that tears streamed down my face. "You have sought the truth your entire life, but you have been blind to it. I have come to show you what you could not see." I tried to respond, to ask who or what this presence was, but no words came. My thoughts felt small, inadequate against the enormity of the truth that surrounded me. The light grew brighter, enveloping me completely, and in that moment I felt everything. It wasn't just an external warmth, it was a revelation. The light reached into the deepest parts of me, exposing everything I had ever hidden. My pride, my doubts, my failures, they were all laid bare before this presence. Yet, unlike the accusing whispers I had heard earlier, this light brought no condemnation. Instead, it brought love, a love so pure, so all-encompassing, that I felt overwhelmed by it. "You have relied on your knowledge," the voice continued, "on your works and your traditions. But they cannot save you. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." The words struck me like lightning. They were familiar, words I had dismissed in the past as teachings from another faith. But now, spoken in this light, they carried a power and authority that I couldn't deny. They resonated deep within me, breaking through every barrier I had built over the years. I felt tears streaming down my face as the truth began to sink in. I had spent my life striving, trying to earn salvation through devotion, through knowledge, through leadership. But now I understood, salvation was not something I could earn. It was a gift, freely given, but only if I was willing to accept it. The light surrounded me completely, and the presence within it grew closer. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. The love radiating from the light was overwhelming, filling every corner of my being, and for the first time I felt truly known. This presence didn't just see me, it understood me, every part of me, and still it loved me. "Jonah," the voice said again, gentle yet commanding, "you have sought to lead others, but you have not truly known the one you claim to serve. You followed the rules, but you missed the relationship." The words pierced my heart. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to list the years of prayer, fasting, and teaching. But as I opened my mouth, I realized that every defense I could offer was hollow. Deep down, I knew the voice was right. I had spent my life trying to earn God's approval, believing that my devotion and works would secure my place in paradise. But I had missed the very heart of faith, knowing God and living in His love. The light grew even brighter, and I felt a profound sense of surrender. I couldn't fight it, couldn't deny it. The truth was undeniable, and in that moment, I let go. I let go of my pride, my striving, my need to prove myself. I let go of everything I had clung to for so long and surrendered to the light. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if the words were audible. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was serving you. But I see now how lost I've been." The presence in the light surrounded me completely, and for the first time, I felt free. The burdens I had carried, the striving, the fear, the pride, they all melted away in the light of this love. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing: my life would never be the same. The voice spoke one last time, filled with hope and promise. "This is not the end, Jonah. This is the beginning. You will return, but you will not be the same. You have been called to walk a new path." As the light enveloped me, I felt a sense of peace unlike anything I had ever known, and in that moment I understood the truth. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone, and I never would be. The light surrounded me completely, and within its warmth I felt a clarity I had never known. Time seemed to lose all meaning as the presence of the light led me through a journey that was both intimate and overwhelming. It wasn't just my past flashing before me, it was my life laid bare, stripped of every pretense and facade. And yet, in the radiance of this presence, I felt no condemnation, only a piercing truth that left no room for self-deception. At first, the memories that unfolded before me were the ones I held onto with pride. I saw myself standing before congregations, leading them in prayer with a voice filled with conviction. I saw the moments when people had turned to me for guidance, their faces etched with trust and reverence. These were the memories that I had carried as proof of my devotion, evidence of a life lived in service to the divine. But as the scenes played out, the light seemed to shift, illuminating details I had never noticed, or perhaps had chosen to ignore. I saw the subtle ways my pride had crept into those moments, how I had begun to see myself as a pillar of wisdom rather than a servant. The whispers of respect, the weight of authority, they had fed my ego in ways I had been unwilling to admit. "You sought recognition," the voice in the light said, its tone calm but unyielding. "You believed your role made you righteous, but your heart was not truly mine." The words cut deep, but they were undeniably true. I watched as more memories unfolded, moments when my actions had been driven by pride rather than love. I saw how I had corrected others harshly, valuing the appearance of righteousness over compassion. I saw the times I had dismissed the struggles of those who sought my help, believing their hardships were simply a result of their lack of faith. It was painful to witness, but I couldn't look away. The light didn't allow for self-pity or excuses, it demanded honesty. And as the memories continued, I saw the walls I had built, walls of pride and judgment that had kept me from truly connecting with those I was meant to serve. "You relied on your strength," the voice said, "but you did not trust in mine. You followed the rules, but you missed the relationship." Tears streamed down my face as the truth of those words sank in. I had spent my life striving, believing that my devotion, my knowledge, and my adherence to tradition would secure my place in paradise. But now, standing in the light of this presence, I saw how far I had fallen short. My actions had been hollow, driven more by a desire to prove myself than by a genuine love for God. And then the memory shifted again. This time, I saw not just my own actions, but their impact on others. I saw the faces of people I had judged harshly, their expressions filled with pain and confusion. I saw moments when my words, spoken without love, had driven people away rather than drawing them closer. It was as though the light was showing me the ripple effect of my choices, the way my pride and judgment had created barriers instead of bridges. One memory stood out above the rest. I saw a young man who had once come to me, seeking guidance during a moment of deep personal struggle. I remembered how I had dismissed him, offering a shallow response that I believed was rooted in truth, but lacked the compassion he so desperately needed. In the light, I saw the aftermath of that moment, how my words had deepened his feelings of isolation and pushed him further into despair. The weight of it was almost unbearable. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the enormity of my failures. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was serving you." The presence in the light didn't turn away. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of love, a love that saw every flaw, every failure, and yet chose to embrace me anyway. It was a love that didn't ignore the truth but sought to heal it. "You cannot change the past," the voice said gently, "but you can choose the path ahead. A life lived in grace, not striving. A life of love, not judgment." As the words sank in, the scenes around me began to shift once more. This time, the light showed me glimpses of what could be, a life transformed by the truth I had now encountered. I saw myself reaching out to those I had once judged, not with pride or superiority, but with humility and compassion. I saw relationships healed, hearts opened, and lives touched by a grace that was not my own. You have been given a gift, the voice continued, not because of what you have done, but because of who I am. Share it with others. Let them see the truth through your life. In that moment, I understood the weight of what was being asked of me. This wasn't just about my own transformation. It was about carrying the light I had encountered back into the world. It was about living a life that reflected the grace and love I had received, a life that would point others to the same truth. The presence in the light drew closer, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was a touch that conveyed both strength and reassurance, a reminder that I was not alone in this journey. The path will not be easy, the voice said, but I will be with you every step of the way. The light surrounded me, vast and unending, and in its glow I felt as though I was standing in the presence of eternity itself. There was no time here, no boundaries, just a profound sense of being fully known and completely accepted. Every part of me, the good, the broken, the hidden, was laid bare before the presence within the light, and yet there was no condemnation, only love. I had heard of divine love before. I had spoken of it to others, taught lessons about it, and dedicated my life to pursuing it. But I now realized that I had never truly understood what it meant. The love I felt in this moment was not conditional, not something to be earned. It simply was, boundless, radiant, and overwhelming. You are not here by chance, Jonah, the voice within the light said. It wasn't just sound. It was as though the words were imprinted on my very soul. They carried weight and meaning far beyond anything I had ever experienced. You have sought truth your entire life, but you have struggled to see it clearly. Now you will see. I fell to my knees, though I couldn't feel the ground beneath me. My voice trembled as I spoke. Who are you? The question felt small, inadequate, but it was all I could manage. What do you want from me? The light seemed to grow even brighter, and the presence within it grew closer, though it was everywhere at once. I am the one who formed you, who has walked with you every step of your life. Even in the moments when you doubted, when you questioned, I was there. Jonah, I have called you to know me, not through rules, not through striving, but through relationship. The words cut deep, exposing truths I had been unwilling to face. I had spent my life searching for God, but I had built walls around myself, walls of pride, of tradition, of fear. I had sought to prove my worth, to earn my place in paradise, and in doing so, I had missed the very heart of faith. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, I don't understand. I thought I was doing everything right. I thought I was following the path. You followed a path, the voice said gently, but it was not the path I had for you. You sought to lead others, but you did not let me lead you. You sought to teach, but you did not allow yourself to be taught. Jonah, you have relied on your own strength, but now it is time to rely on mine. The presence within the light moved closer still, and I felt as though I was being enveloped in a warmth that reached the deepest parts of my soul. For the first time, I felt safe, not because of anything I had done, but because of who the light was. It was a safety that came from being fully known and fully loved. But how? I asked, my voice breaking. How do I let go of everything I've built? How do I follow a path I don't understand? Trust, the voice said simply. Surrender. You have spent your life striving, Jonah, but now you must rest. Rest in my love, in my grace, in the truth that I am enough. You do not need to earn my love. It has always been yours. The words were like a balm to my soul, soothing wounds I hadn't even realized I carried. I had always believed that faith was about action, about doing, about proving myself worthy, but now, in the presence of the light, I saw how flawed that belief was. Faith wasn't about earning, it was about receiving. It was about surrendering to a love that was far greater than anything I could comprehend. The light grew even brighter, and I felt as though it was pouring into me, filling every empty space, every crack and crevice. It wasn't just light, it was life, a life I had never known but now couldn't imagine living without. "Jonah," the voice said, filled with a compassion that brought fresh tears to my eyes, "you will return to the world you have known, but you will not be the same. I have called you to be a light in the darkness, to share the truth you have found here. It will not be easy, but you will not be alone. I will be with you, guiding you, strengthening you every step of the way." The thought of returning to the life I had left behind filled me with both hope and fear. How could I go back knowing what I now knew? How could I live in a world that no longer felt like home? "I'm afraid," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are not strong enough," the voice said, not unkindly. "But I am, and my strength will be made perfect in your weakness. Do not rely on yourself, Jonah. Rely on me." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I fully understood what was being asked of me, but in the light, I felt a peace that surpassed understanding, a peace that assured me I didn't need to have all the answers. I only needed to trust. As the light began to shift and fade, I felt a hand on my shoulder, a touch that was both reassuring and empowering. "Go now, Jonah," the voice said. "Walk the path I have set before you. Share the truth you have found. And remember, you are never alone." The light pulsed once more, brighter than ever, and then it was gone. I felt myself being drawn back, the warmth of the present still lingering but growing fainter with each passing moment. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the experience ended. The first thing I became aware of was the sound, a faint rhythmic beeping that seemed to echo from a distance. Slowly, like the tide returning to shore, sensations began to flood back into my body. There was pain, dull but persistent, accompanied by the heaviness of limbs that felt foreign, as though they belonged to someone else. The beeping grew louder, and with it came other noises, hushed voices, the faint hum of machinery, and the rustle of fabric. I opened my eyes, and the blinding glare of fluorescent lights made me blink rapidly. The sterile white walls and the faint smell of antiseptic told me immediately where I was, a hospital. The light that had filled my very being only moments ago, or what felt like moments, was gone, replaced by the cold reality of the physical world. I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in my chest forced me to remain still. "You're awake," a nurse said, her voice soft but tinged with relief. She leaned over me, her eyes warm and kind. "You gave us quite a scare." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, and the words caught like sandpaper. The nurse handed me a cup of water, helping me take small sips. Each swallow brought me further back into the world I had left behind, though my mind still lingered on what I had experienced. It felt as though I were caught between two realities, the one I had always known and the one I had glimpsed in the light. As the nurse checked my vitals, I turned my gaze inward, replaying the vision in my mind. The light, the voice, the overwhelming love, I could still feel it, like an echo resonating deep within me. It wasn't just a memory, it was a presence, a truth that had imprinted itself on my soul. The world around me felt different now, as though it had been cast in new colors, illuminated by a clarity I couldn't quite describe. A doctor entered the room, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Jonah," he said, glancing at the chart in his hands, "you've had a heart attack, a severe one. We weren't sure you were going to make it." The words hit me like a blow, but they didn't carry the weight they might have before. Fear, which had once been my constant companion, seemed strangely distant now. I nodded, listening as the doctor explained the details of my condition, the procedures they had performed, and the long road to recovery that lay ahead. His words were important, but my mind was elsewhere, still anchored in the light I had encountered. When the doctor finished and left the room, I lay in silence, staring at the ceiling. Questions swirled in my mind, colliding with the remnants of the experience I had just undergone. Why had I been sent back? What was I supposed to do with the truth I had been shown? How could I even begin to explain what had happened to me? As the days passed, the physical reality of my recovery became more apparent. My body was weak, each movement a struggle, and the pain in my chest was a constant reminder of how close I had come to death. Friends and family visited, their faces etched with worry and relief, but I found it difficult to talk to them. How could I explain that while my body had been clinging to life, my soul had been set free? One evening, as the hospital quieted and the world outside sank into darkness, I finally allowed myself to confront the enormity of what had happened. I closed my eyes, letting the memory of the light wash over me. It was still there, as vibrant and real as when I had first encountered it. And with it came the voice, echoing softly in my heart. You will return, but you will not be the same. You have been called to walk a new path. The weight of those words settled over me, bringing both comfort and a sense of responsibility. I had been given a second chance, not just to live, but to live differently, to share the truth I had experienced, and to walk the path that had been illuminated for me. But how? How could I possibly translate the ineffable into words? How could I convince others of something so profound, so transformative, when it defied logic and explanation? I wrestled with these questions for days, my heart torn between the fear of rejection and the urgency of my mission. But every time I prayed, every time I sought guidance, the answer was the same: trust. You are not alone. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, I returned home to a world that felt both familiar and foreign. The same walls, the same routines, the same faces, but everything had shifted. I no longer saw life through the lens of rules and rituals. Instead, I saw it through the lens of grace. And with that new perspective came a sense of clarity, a conviction that I could no longer live as I once had. My first conversation about the experience was with my family. We gathered in the living room, the air heavy with anticipation. I told them everything about the collapse, the void, the accusing whispers, and the light that had changed everything. I spoke of the love I had encountered, the truth I had been shown, and the mission I had been given. Their reactions were mixed. My wife listened silently, her eyes wide with shock and her hands trembling. My eldest son frowned, his brow furrowed in confusion, and my brother, a devout scholar like me, couldn't hide his anger. "Jonah," he said, his voice low and tight, "do you realize what you're saying? You're claiming that everything we've lived for, everything we've believed is incomplete." I nodded, my heart heavy but resolute. "I'm not denying what we've believed," I said, "but I've seen something greater, something that has transformed everything I thought I knew. I can't stay silent about this. The truth is too important." The room fell into tense silence. I could see the struggle in their eyes, the tension between love for me and the weight of their own convictions. It was a tension I understood all too well because I had lived it myself, but I also knew that the truth I had encountered was worth whatever cost I might face. As the days turned into weeks, the reactions from my community mirrored those of my family. Some were curious, asking cautious questions and listening with open minds. Others were skeptical, their disbelief evident in their furrowed brows and skeptical tones. And some were outright hostile, accusing me of betrayal and warning me of the consequences of sharing such a message. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the weight of rejection felt almost unbearable, when the familiar world I had known seemed to close its doors to me. But in those moments I remembered the light, the voice, and the promise, "You are not alone," and I clung to that truth with all my strength. The transformation wasn't immediate, and the path ahead was far from clear, but with each step I began to see glimpses of what was possible. Small signs of hope, of lives touched by the truth I had been given, and though the road was difficult, I knew it was the one I was meant to walk. Returning home from the hospital marked the beginning of a new life, yet it was a life fraught with uncertainty. I had seen the light, felt its truth, and heard the call to walk a new path. But as I stood on the threshold of my home, staring at the familiar walls that now felt foreign, I realized the enormity of the task ahead. How could I, a man respected for my unwavering dedication to tradition, share a message that would undoubtedly challenge the beliefs of those closest to me? The first challenge came from my own hesitation. I sat alone in my living room, the house eerily quiet, grappling with the fear that had taken root in my heart. What would my family think? My friends? My community? I had spent years as a spiritual leader, teaching others about faith, guiding them toward what I believed was the straight path. And now, here I was, preparing to tell them that everything I had known, everything I had taught, had been transformed by an experience I couldn't fully explain. The courage to share my story came slowly, like the first light of dawn breaking through the darkness. One evening, as we gathered around the dinner table, I took a deep breath and began. My wife, my 2 children, and my younger brother all looked up at me with curious but cautious eyes. "I have something important to tell you," I said, my voice trembling. "Something that will change everything." I told them about the collapse, the void, the whispers that had revealed the truth about my life. I described the light, the overwhelming presence, the love that had pierced through my pride, and the voice that had called me by name. I explained how my understanding of faith had been turned inside out, how I had come to realize that the path I had walked was not one of relationship but of striving. The reactions were as mixed as I had feared. My wife listened in silence, her face pale, her hands gripping the edges of her chair. My eldest son looked down at his plate, avoiding my gaze. My younger brother, who had always admired my dedication to tradition, shook his head, anger and confusion flickering across his face. "Jonah," he said, his voice low but sharp, "do you realize what you're saying? You're claiming that everything we've lived for, everything we've taught, is incomplete." "I'm not denying what we've taught," I replied, my voice steady but soft, "but I've seen something greater, something that has transformed everything I thought I knew. I can't stay silent about this. The truth is too important." His eyes narrowed and his hands clenched into fists. "Do you understand what this will mean for you, for us? People will call you a traitor. They'll think you've turned your back on everything we stand for." "I know," I said, the pain of his words cutting deep. "But I can't keep this to myself. I have to share what I've seen, what I've felt. It's the only way." The room fell into tense silence, the weight of my words settling over each of them. I could see the struggle in their eyes, the tension between love for me and the fear of what my revelation might mean. It was a tension I understood all too well because I had lived it myself. But even as the fear threatened to consume me, I felt the faint echo of the voice from the light, "You are not alone." Sharing my story with my community was even more daunting. As I stood before the congregation, the familiar faces looking up at me with trust and expectation, I felt the full weight of what I was about to say. These people had relied on me for guidance, for answers, for clarity, and now I was preparing to tell them that the path I had led them on was not the path I had been called to walk. The words came hesitantly at first, my voice trembling as I described the collapse and the void, but as I spoke of the light, the love, the truth, the call to grace, my conviction grew stronger. I told them everything, holding nothing back, even as I saw confusion and disbelief flicker across their faces. The reactions were as varied as I had expected. Some listened with quiet curiosity, their brows furrowed but their eyes filled with questions they couldn't yet articulate. Others were skeptical, their expressions guarded, their voices questioning, and some were outright angry, accusing me of betrayal, of abandoning the faith I had dedicated my life to. "You've been deceived," one man said, his voice loud and filled with disdain. "This isn't truth, it's delusion." "I understand your doubts," I replied, meeting his gaze, "but I can only tell you what I've experienced. It's up to you to decide what to do with it." The hardest moments came from those I had considered friends and mentors. Their rejection stung, their words cutting deep as they warned me to stop speaking, claiming I was causing confusion and division. Some even threatened me, leaving hateful notes on my doorstep or turning their backs on me in public. The weight of their hostility was almost unbearable, and there were moments when I wondered if I had the strength to continue. But even in the darkest moments, I felt the presence of the light, the love, the grace, the call to trust. And slowly, amidst the resistance, glimmers of hope began to appear. One evening, after sharing my story during a community gathering, a man approached me, his eyes filled with tears. "Jonah," he said, his voice trembling, "I don't know what to believe anymore, but I can't deny the peace you have. I've never seen anything like it. Can we talk?" We began meeting in secret, discussing not just my experience, but the truth of grace and love I had encountered. Over time, I saw his heart begin to change, his questions shifting from doubt to genuine curiosity. One day, after months of conversations, he said, "I want to know the truth you found. I want to experience that grace." His transformation was the first of many. Slowly, more people began to approach me, some out of curiosity, others out of desperation. They wanted to know more about the truth I had encountered, the freedom that didn't come from rules or striving, but from a relationship with the light. Each conversation was a reminder of why I had been sent back, and with every heart that opened to the truth, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Not everyone accepted the message, and the resistance didn't go away, but the fruit of my mission was undeniable. I saw families healed as they embraced grace instead of living in fear. I saw individuals who had carried heavy burdens for years finally find peace. The truth was spreading, not through force or argument, but through love and testimony. As I stood before the mirror in my small, quiet home, I barely recognized the man staring back at me. It wasn't my reflection that had changed. My hair was still graying at the temples, and the lines of time still framed my face. What had changed was something deeper, something that couldn't be captured by the glass before me. I had seen the truth, stood in its light, and it had reshaped me from the inside out. The man who had once been driven by pride and tradition was gone. In his place stood someone who walked not in striving, but in grace. Every day since that moment in the light had been a step into the unknown. Returning to the life I had once lived was not an option. The old patterns, the rituals that had defined my existence, now felt hollow in comparison to the relationship I had found. My purpose was clear: to share the truth I had been given, to bring light to those still walking in darkness. The mission was not without its challenges. Many in my community still viewed me with suspicion, their eyes filled with doubt or, worse, disdain. Some whispered behind my back, accusing me of abandoning the faith I had once championed. Others avoided me altogether, their absence a quiet but painful rejection. And yet, amidst the resistance, there were moments of hope that reminded me why I had been called to walk this path. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I found myself in a small gathering of people who had come to hear my story. It wasn't a large crowd, just a handful of curious souls who had heard whispers of my transformation and wanted to know more. As I spoke, recounting my journey into the void, the whispers of accusation and the radiant light that had brought me back, I saw something shift in their eyes. It was the same shift I had felt in my own heart on that fateful day. A softening, a glimmer of curiosity, a spark of hope. After the gathering, a young man approached me. His name was Amir, and he carried the weight of doubt and fear in his eyes. "I've always felt like I wasn't enough," he admitted, his voice trembling. "No matter how hard I tried, it never felt like it was enough for God." I placed a hand on his shoulder, meeting his gaze with compassion. "You're not alone, Amir," I said. "I lived that way for most of my life, believing I had to earn God's love. But the truth is, you don't have to strive. God's love isn't something you earn, it's something you receive. It's a gift, freely given." Tears welled in his eyes, and in that moment, I saw the first cracks in the walls he had built around his heart. We spoke for hours, long after the others had gone, and by the end of the night, he told me he wanted to experience the grace I had found. It was moments like these that reminded me why I had been sent back. It wasn't about numbers or recognition. It was about lives touched, hearts transformed, and burdens lifted. As time passed, the message I carried began to spread in ways I hadn't anticipated. Small gatherings turned into larger ones, and people from all walks of life came to hear about the grace that had changed my life. Some were skeptical, their arms crossed and their expressions guarded. Others were desperate, their eyes pleading for a hope they had yet to find. And some came out of sheer curiosity, unsure of what to expect but willing to listen. The resistance didn't disappear, and there were still days when the burden of rejection felt heavy. Some members of my family struggled to accept the path I had chosen, their love for me tempered by a fear that I had strayed too far from the tradition they held dear. My brother, once my closest confidant, remained distant, his anger and disappointment evident in every conversation we had. Yet even in the midst of these struggles, I felt the unwavering presence of the light, the love and grace that had carried me through the void and back. One of the most profound moments came during a meeting with a woman named Layla, a mother of 3 who had endured years of shame and guilt, believing her past mistakes had made her unworthy of God's love. As she shared her story, her voice trembling with emotion, I felt the familiar pull of compassion that had been planted in my heart by the light. "Layla," I said gently, "God's grace isn't reserved for the perfect. It's for the broken, the weary, the ones who feel unworthy. You don't have to carry this burden alone. He's already carried it for you." Her tears flowed freely as the truth began to take root in her heart. In the weeks that followed, I saw a transformation in her, a new light in her eyes, a freedom in her steps. She began sharing her own story with others, spreading the message of grace in ways I never could have imagined. These moments were the fuel that kept me moving forward, even when the road was difficult. I came to understand that my mission wasn't about convincing others or winning arguments. It was about living a life that reflected the truth I had encountered. It was about showing, not just telling, the love and grace that had been so freely given to me. Every day brought new challenges and new opportunities. There were conversations that ended in anger, doors that were shut in my face, and moments when I felt the weight of my calling pressing down on me. But there were also moments of profound beauty, smiles that replaced tears, hope that bloomed in the hearts of the weary, and lives that were forever changed by the message of grace. As I stood before another gathering one evening, looking out at the faces of those who had come to hear my story, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I was no longer the man I had been, defined by pride and striving. I was no longer a prisoner of fear or a slave to tradition. I was free, not because of anything I had done, but because of what had been done for me. The light I had encountered in the void was no longer a distant memory. It was a constant presence, guiding me, strengthening me, and reminding me of the love that had set me on this path. And as I spoke to the crowd that night, sharing the truth that had transformed my life, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. This was the path I had been called to walk, a path of grace, love, and truth. It wasn't an easy path, but it was one filled with purpose and peace. And though the journey was far from over, I knew one thing for certain: I would walk it faithfully, trusting in the one who had brought me out of the darkness and into the light.